Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the later Middle Ages. At the end of the last section, we were comparing knights and samurais, in the feudalism system. Here we're going to take a look more about really the relationship and the power struggle between the Pope, who led the Christian Church, the Catholic Church at that time, and the kings of the different kingdoms throughout this area of Europe that we have been studying. One of the main words that you're going to need to know after this section is this one right here, excommunicate. This word means to cast out from the church. So if you've done something wrong against the church, something like that, you're not killed or whatever, you're banished from the church. You're excommunicated. You can no longer receive communion. Excommunicate, no more communion. All right. A second thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the power the Pope has in Europe, the Pope being the leader of the church. Really, the Pope gains their power from the people. The people gave the Pope power over them because they believed that the Pope was a messenger of God, was God's representative here on earth. The Pope got to decide when someone was acting against the church. So this here excommunication power was really in the hands of the Pope. He could excommunicate people from the church, and this means he could excommunicate a peasant, a knight. He could even excommunicate a king from the church, and that was a huge power to have. And popes really wielded this power over the people, held it over the people, and I hate to say, but it might even be fear that gave power to the Pope, because really at this time in Christianity, it was really the only religion throughout Europe that if you were excommunicated from the church, you were basically banished from the villages, from those manors that we talked about under feudalism. If you were gone from the church, you're not going to be able to live in that village anymore. Things like that. So really held a lot of power, the popes did. And the kings and the popes are going to fight over this power, over who gets to lead different parts of the country, making laws, all that type of stuff. All right, so the kings, though, of Europe, there were many different kings, all these different colors. These represent different kingdoms throughout Europe and things like that that we've talked about over here. The three major ones, though, were here in France, this kind of purplish area. You have England up here, and then this Holy Roman Empire. And remember, the Holy Roman Empire, this was, all of this at one time was part of Charlemagne's empire and things like that. Now, the kings were a little bit different depending on where they served. So here in England and France, the kings were, how would you say, they inherited their power. So really it was just handed down from the father to the son in, say, England and France. But the Holy Roman Empire was a little bit different. In the Holy Roman Empire, they didn't inherit the land. They were elected by the empire's noblemen. Okay, so a king of the Holy Roman Empire was probably a nobleman. So there might, let's say there's 100 noblemen. They will elect one of the noblemen to be the king of the Holy Roman Empire. And then the Pope had some say in that too. That's what made it the Holy Roman Empire. And that goes back to Charlemagne when he was, how would you say, crowned by the Pope as the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. But it wasn't handed down from family member to family member here in the Holy Roman Empire. It was actually a selection of noblemen and things like that. So it's almost like an election that we would even have today to be the leader of our own country. All right. A lot of disagreements, though, that went on in Europe at this time here. And one of the major disagreements was over power in Europe. So who actually had control over these different kingdoms? Yes, there was a king of England, a king of France, king of the Holy Roman Empire. But the Pope in Rome actually wanted to wield power over even the kings. Right? You also had different, if we go back to this other slide again, whoops, if we go back to the slide here, you also have different sections of Christianity. So here's the Western Roman Empire over here, or the old Western Roman Empire, and the Pope would be here in Rome. But over here you have Constantinople. This here was still the Byzantine Empire. You have the Eastern Roman Empire still going on, and they were still doing everything that they wanted to do with Christianity. And a lot of times they didn't really care what the Pope over here was saying. So that was going to lead to a little bit of a split within the Christian church itself. So the eastern half of Europe over in Constantinople, they had bishops, and bishops are kind of elders of the church. They're leaders of the church also right underneath the Pope. But they didn't want the Pope to have any say over them. They thought they had more power than the Pope even had over them. And the Pope in the Rome wanted to prove them wrong. And so what ends up happening is there is a split within the Christian church, within this Catholic church also. And so then you have the split in the eastern side over in Constantinople. It will become known as the Eastern Orthodox Christians. And then over the western half, they become the Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic just being because the Pope was stationed in Rome. They are now known as the Roman Catholics with the Pope as a leader. And this will come in kind of play when we get to talking about the Crusades later on. And because in one of the Crusades or a couple of the Crusades, with the with the Western Europeans going over to the East, they actually start attacking Constantinople because of the Eastern Orthodox Christians. But that's for a later time. Now, this is going to get into a little bit right here, this number 6, problem between Pope Gregory and Emperor Henry, Henry IV. And this becomes an example of excommunication and the power excommunication had over even the kings of Europe. What happened is in Europe, kings wanted to select the bishops to serve their kingdom. So like Henry wanted to select the bishops of England, or the Holy Roman Empire actually, wanted to select the bishops that would be the Christian leaders of that territory there in the Holy Roman Empire. However, the Pope believed that he was the only one that had the power to select the religious leaders of all those different kingdoms. Eventually, what's going to happen is Pope Gregory is going to excommunicate King Henry, basically kick King Henry out of the church, and told the nobles of the Holy Roman Empire to rise up against Henry and select a different king. Well, of course, this is embarrassing to Henry. This is this to him is seen as him losing his power and all of that. He's actually going to go to Rome. King Henry IV is going to go to Rome, and he is going to beg for Pope Gregory's forgiveness. Now, Pope Gregory, wanting to show how much power he has over King Henry, refuses to meet with King Henry for more than 3 days. King Henry is going to stand outside Pope Gregory's palace for 3 days in the snow. And he's going to stand there barefoot, without jacket, coat, and all that, almost freezing to death, before Pope Gregory is going to forgive King Henry and go ahead and allow him to continue to be emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. But this is going to show not only King Henry, but his followers, the power that the Pope has. So this would be one incident where the Pope actually exerts his power and shows his power over even the kings of Europe. Now, that's not going to last forever, but this was one instance of that happening. All right, last thing I want to talk about is a papal bull. Okay, this will be, I think, on the first page of your reading. And I just kind of use this as a side note and things like that. You've probably heard of a bulletin. So if you ever heard, okay, hey, we have a bulletin. A bulletin is just basically comes from this time period. It doesn't have to be religious. A papal bull, though, papal is just another word for pope. So the papal bull was basically a message, a public message from the Pope to the people, a type of public decree, a letter or charter issued by the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. It comes from the seal, the bulla, that was traditionally appended on the end in order to authenticate it. So, the Pope has its own seal. He would write out his letter, or someone would write out this decree from the Pope, and then they would seal it with the papal bulla so that the rest of the kingdoms and all that knew it came from the Pope. But this is where we get the word bulletin and things like that, is just a message and all of that. So make sure you understand. We still have those today, a papal bull. All right, that's pretty much it for this here. This section was about really showing the struggle between popes and kings as to who was going to have power over the people of Europe. And I'll tell you, here in the beginnings of this section and all that, you kind of get the understanding the Pope right now has the power, and that is shown through that story with King Henry. It will change later on, of course. The Pope is going to lose their power, or the religious leaders are going to lose that power. But for now, it does show that the Pope has quite a bit of power. The religion has a lot of power in Europe. All right, that's pretty much it for this here. If you guys need anything, please let me know. Make sure you complete the quiz for this section also. Thank you, and have a great day, you guys.